Welcome to the Hair of the Dog podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Begley, and today we are talking about the trifecta of legal protection for your business, contracts, insurance, liability, and more with none other than Rachel Brenke from TheLawTog. Stay tuned.
Welcome to the Hair of the Dog podcast. If you're a pet photographer ready to make more money and start living a life by your design, you've come to the right place. And now, your host, pet photographer, travel addict, chocolate martini connoisseur, Nicole Begley.
Hey everybody, Nicole here from Hair of the Dog podcast, and today I have an incredible guest for you, none other than Rachel Brenke from TheLawTog, the one, the only. Welcome, Rachel, to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Of course. So great to have you here because, you know, legal stuff is super important, even though people would rather just focus on taking pretty pictures.
I know. But you know what I love about this, besides I love your podcast and your community, I love dogs. So I was so excited when I checked my calendar again today. I was like, oh, I get to talk to Nicole and we get to talk about dogs and legal. This is like my dream for a Friday.
I love it. All the puppies. Woo!
All the puppies.
Oh my goodness. For sure. So my community is, as you know, we have pet photographers of all, gosh, what's the word I'm looking for? It's Friday. My brain's already not working. This is
types.
trouble.
I mean, I guess
all levels.
all levels, all types. I mean, it's not just dog. Yeah.
Yeah, it's for sure. But yeah, so there are some people that are doing this as a hobby that are maybe just like taking pictures for rescues. There are some people that are like, oh man, this could actually be a thing. So they're starting to do portfolio building. And then there's some building their business. And then of course, there are those in business. And we know that legal protection is super important, but what is your recommendation? I know I have mine, but I'd love to hear it from yours of when they need to have a contract. Like, do you have to wait until you start your business or should you have that in place prior?
Yeah, I love this question, and I'll try not to be like super law professor long-winded on it, but the sooner that you can plan for having the legal stuff in place, the better off that you will be. I always share, that it's cheaper and easier to prevent issues than it is to clean it up. And it's so incredibly true. Because I hear and I see the stress in clients that come to me after an issue has happened, because let's take the contract, for example. Not only would you, in the beginning, I get it, right? Where many of us are bootstrapping business. When you first start out, you're not even sure if you're going to be able to make a go at it. So you're like, I don't want to invest a lot. But if you end up having a problem, you're going to end up paying to fix the problem and for the contract that you should have had in the first place. So you're going to end up paying for it at some point. So yeah, the sooner that you can get like legal contracts in place, and there's the three main ones really, I call them the essentials, is like your services contract. So it's between you and client. Model release, if you're going to have humans in the photos, or kind of a property release for animals or pets really. And then print release, if you have digital files. Those are really like the three core ones that you should focus on getting. Now, keep in mind, we're in a fairly unregulated industry. There's very low barrier to entry, which is actually kind of a good thing because then we get to choose where our money goes, right, when we're investing and setting up. So contracts is the one piece. I always try to look at it as like a triangle. That's one corner of the triangle. The other two would be liability insurance and proper legal entity setup. So either like LLC or corporation. FYI, I'm US based, so I'll be using US terms on the podcast. But yeah, ultimately, those are the three key starting points that I really, really encourage, especially pet photographers, to get under your belt, get in your legal toolkit when you're starting out, if you can, or very quickly. I know you gotta do business to get some money, to get that stuff going sometimes. So as quick as you can make that goal happen.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And I think a lot of people might be under the false impression that, oh, well, I created an LLC, so therefore I have this legal separation. So I don't really need contracts because I'm protected, right?
Yeah. And and the thing is, I want you to kind of picture the three things we just mentioned: insurance, the entity, so like LLC, and contracts, is like hurdles between you and your client. And we want to try to put as much like insulation, hurdles between us and any potential issues, because contracts are not foolproof, LLC is not foolproof, insurance is not foolproof. That's why we have the kind of three of them that work together. Now here's the funny thing is I always get asked, what do I have to do to be a legal business? And actually, none of those three things I just mentioned is what's legally required. This just is what I'm legally recommending. So like legally required things, which really would be your first step, is probably going to be a permit or license, depending on your jurisdiction, whether it's city or county. And that's really, and paying your taxes, of course, if you reach that threshold. Those are the two legal requirements. But the three of this triad, this triangle of insurance, contracts, and entity choice are what I highly recommend as a minimum, even though it's not legally required.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. So with those contracts, what kind of pieces? I mean, definitely the services, the model property release, print release. Can you put those all kind of in one big contract? Do you have to have your client? I think people might hear that and like, oh my God, I have to have my client sign 37 things. That's too much.
Well, before I answer that, I want us to kind of like shift our mind, not just from these being legal tools, but I love having contracts as expectation setting tools, right?
Cool.
We want our clients to know what to expect. And the more information, the more you equip your clients with information, it increases their buyer's confidence. It's a whole psychology thing. And most people don't think that, contracts will increase like a client psychology. They'll have more confidence in you. They'll perceive you as more professional. They'll have more confidence in you, your abilities, whether they verbally say that or cognitively think it. It's an underlying, but it also sets that expectation. So really, really important. Now, to answer your question, so hopefully that allayed some concerns about using them. You can fold together your services contract and your model release. Now, or property release. That's assuming for model, if you're going to have humans in the photos as well. You probably could fold it all together. Oftentimes I recommend breaking it out, especially if you are photographing a session or an event with multiple people in it. It just is easier for model releases to be executed when they're separate. And sometimes your clients don't even want to have, their face. Maybe they can't do a profession or something on the internet. When it comes to like property, I hate calling the animals property.
I know.
Even though legally they are. They're my babies. My kids always say, "Who's your favorite child?"
You're like, don't make me answer that.
No, I do. I say Bellamy. He's my German Shepherd mix. But yeah, I could readily see folding the property release into a services contract so that you can have one singular one for your clients to sign. Yeah. But, honestly, with the use of like these online CRMs, digital signing tools, even if they're broken out, it's really streamlined. We're way past the days of sending a .doc or PDF, or they have to go print it, hunt down printer ink, scan it, send it back. So, you can have them together, but I really suggest kind of breaking them out separately just because they have their own different intentions. Like the services contract regulates the session itself. It creates the legal relationship, whereas the model or property release is the client giving you permission for the use of either their human face or the pet face in your marketing and for your promotion of your business. So they have two distinct purposes. Bottom line answer, you can put them together. I typically recommend breaking them out.
Yeah. All right. That's perfect. Speaking of the ease of these CRMs and signing, I know I hear questions still periodically on if that is legally binding. Mm-hmm. So do you want to fill them in on that? Yeah.
Yeah. You know what's great about this? I mean, today alone, if you have loaded an app on your phone, you've probably already signed 4 contracts this morning and didn't even know it.
Yes, I accept all terms and conditions. Oh boy.
You know what? I don't read that junk either. I'm just like, I'll figure it out later. But that being said, we have e-sign act here in the U.S. Digital contracts signatures are readily accepted. The things that I would look for if you're going to use an online contract signing system, and most of them are, in compliance within some of these formalities. I always like to look forward to, is there ever going to be a question as to who signed the contract? Like if I have to stand in front of a judge and, and prove that someone signed the contract so that we could enforce that contract against them, what are the things that I would need? Because if they're on the other side of the computer, right, I'm not necessarily going to see them signing it, not going to know. Having an actual signature, and I know it's not really actual, it's a digital signature and they look nothing like our actual signatures, but having that, as well as a timestamp and IP address that in many systems, once the form or the contract is submitted, should have that included. These aren't going to be the be-all and end-all to prove who actually did it, but it's just evidence we would look to if there was ever a question as to who signed it. So use digital contracts with confidence. This issue that I just brought up, I've only ever dealt with it once in the courtroom, and it was so quick. I went through the 3 things I just mentioned, and the judge was like, okay, good. You signed it. Yeah, next thing, move on, right? It's not going to be that big of a deal, but you never know. And especially if you have minor children in photographs, and I know, with pets, you may or may not have family members in the photographs, or if you suspect there's any sort of potential, this is more for like family photographers, but if there's like a custodial arrangement or you just get a hint of something, I just make sure you're on the up and up of proving, who signed, et cetera, so that if you ever need to enforce your contract, you can.
Right. Well, they have like joint custody of dogs sometimes now, so.
Oh no, I will go for soul. That is not happening.
I will take you to court for all you're worth of keeping the dog.
Oh, yeah.
You can have the house.
You can have the house. I'm taking the dog.
That's so funny. I love it. So with like pet photography, there's these general things that we usually have in these photography contracts. But are there specific things that pet photographers like really need to be cognizant of, for contracts, or things that could potentially go wrong that maybe wouldn't be an issue with some other genre?
Yeah, and I'm glad you asked this because I meant to say this earlier. Looking at photography generally, and I like to bring this forth in case there's some people listening who may dabble in other niches of photography. Pet photography is on kind of the list of what I think is a higher potential liability. You are working with animals, point blank. Bellamy is my boy, but he's an animal, right? And so there is a level of unpredictability that can happen. There's different levels of training, non-trained dogs, situations, etc. So I do put pet photography in a category where you need to look, like the triangle we talked about earlier, but especially your contracts, being mindful of asking the right questions to your clients, so that's not really in the contract, but you could put like a questionnaire to kind of ask them, is there any like trigger for your dog, training, etc. What works best for them. And then on the contract side of things, definitely want to have a requirement of notice. I know that some pet photographers want to have proof of vaccinations for that the animals are up to date on vaccinations. You want to have like liability type of language in your contract. So if there is some sort of harm that occurs to you or to the animal or anyone else in the session, and that's especially if you're listening and you photograph animals that are not pets, that's even more important because you may be renting a horse or bringing in, a animal that is not owned by your clients. That kind of liability piece is especially incredibly important in your contracts. I'm trying to think of anything else.
I actually have a question around that was definitely an unusual situation of she's a friend of mine, pet photographer, and her and her client were attacked by a dog, not anything to do with the session, like some other random person's dog at the session, which is just crazy.
Yeah.
Is that, does your general liability just protect you against, what happens in a situation like that other than just like everyone being completely mortified and like, oh my God, how the hell did this happen?
I know. And that's kind of one thing. I'm glad you brought this up because that is a good point to make, that I can talk about all this liability stuff. But let's say that I have a Belgian Mal, who, by the way, is the biggest baby in the world. He looks scary. Actually, before we got on here, I was eating lunch and he wouldn't leave me alone. So I just put the broom next to me and he runs out of the room. And he's just scared of brooms anyhow. somehow.
That's all right. My horse doesn't like the rain. So, there's that. They're all weird.
I love how they have it. That's what I'm saying. How are they property? They have preferences.
I know. He tries to hide under me. If I'm leading him in the rain, he tries to hide his head under me. I'm like, you're 1,300 pounds. You won't fit.
I love it. What was I going to say? Oh, I bring up Coda, the Belgian Mal, because I'm like, if I take him and I go, well, he won't do it. Any other Mal, maybe attack, right? And I make a dog go attack my client. No contract,
right.
No LLC, no insurance is going to protect me there. But like a situation you're talking about, your general liability should assist to help you, the photographer, and also the client, because that was definitely something you didn't have control over, and it was
right.
completely unrelated, like third party. But yeah, your liability insurance, and this is a really good point. This was on my list for us to talk about, is when you call, since we're in this category of a higher liability,
right.
Potential liability, when you call your insurance company, make sure you're not just like, oh, I'm a photographer, because they're going to think that you're just skipping around a park with, I don't know, balloons, right? You got to let them know that you have this added level of animals. You've got pets in the mix, and just to because you don't want to find out after the fact that wouldn't cover what you're doing, in case they consider it also like a high liability, high risk type of photography. You just ask the questions. I always say call like 2 to 3 companies and just verbally throw up everything that you're doing and be like, sort it out. Tell me, can you cover me?
Right. Absolutely. And on that same liability, if you were at a session and you were bit by your client's dog, is that something that your liability insurance covers? Or like, do you get into like this weird place where your health insurance is like, you were working, I'm not going to cover you? Or is that like your personal health insurance, or what happens in that case?
I think you're going to have to look at your policy coverage to see which insurance is going to apply. Oftentimes in a situation like that, liability insurance will have it carved out to say your health insurance needs to cover like the medical bills, but will help cover, X, Y, and Z. Right. I do know, and I know this unfortunately from when my dog was murdered, that homeowners policies could help to pay for attacks, etc., including legal fees, medical bills.
Right.
So you could always, if you wanted to, request that have your client make a claim to their homeowner's insurance policy to help cover you. I wouldn't rely on that though, because not everyone has homeowner's insurance. You don't know if it'll be excluded, so don't rely on that. But just a thought, if you ever run into that sort of situation.
Yeah. Well, and then the insurance companies always do their best to not pay. We got that for when I broke my finger. So I needed to have surgery last summer from said baby horse that's scared of the rain. And so then I get this thing like, after all the stuff, the insurance company's like, oh, we just paid a lot of money to fix your finger. So I get this thing in the mail of just like, where did this happen? On what property? With whose things? I'm with my horse that I own at the property that I pay to keep him at. You're not going after like the barns, no, just pay my medical bill.
Yeah, no, they do that because they want to try to get the money, coming from another source.
Right.
So that's a good point. Your liability insurance policy may, depending on the inclusions, may say, we need this information from your client, etc. Yeah, it's a tricky situation when insurance is, I freaking hate it. I hate insurance companies. I love to hate them, hate to love them sometimes, because I feel like it's a good peace of mind to have. And there's some companies that are really good, and also depends on the claim. Then other times you have to fight like the devil in order to get what you're legally owed. And I hate that. But anyways, I digress on that. I say all that to say, you see why I also, because I often hear, back to what we were talking about earlier, many photographers go, oh, well, I'll just use my homeowner's policy.
Right.
Well, oftentimes your business activities are excluded, so don't rely on that. But insurance, out of the 3 that we talked about, the LLC or corporation entity, contracts, and insurance, I would rely on insurance the least. I would have it there because it is kind of nice if you run into a situation, you can pass a claim off to your insurance company, even for maybe things, I don't want to jump the gun on copyright infringement and stuff, but any legal claims, sometimes they'll cover your attorney's fees.
Yeah.
So but I wouldn't hang my hat on insurance being number one, and definitely don't operate as a sole proprietor with just liability insurance. You're looking at a lot of not being covered when you need it.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And the liability insurance is really not that expensive, even though we're at a higher risk of with the animals and things like that. It's usually just a couple $100 for $1 million for the year. So definitely a must have in your business, in my opinion, for sure. Yes. All right. Jumping back to contracts a little bit, there was another question that I see come up a lot in your Facebook group, and some of my students had that question too about, is there anything in, because what we're doing is, a custom service and about protecting refund requests or, protecting chargebacks or things like that after the fact.
What can we do with that contractually?
Yeah.
This is where we want to write into the contract. You are correct. It is customized services, so it's even a bit more special, and that has its own pluses and minuses to it. But contractually speaking, this is where we want to be very clear with the clients. This is what you're going to receive. This is what my portfolio looks like. This is what I can or cannot do, will or will not do in Photoshop. What I'm willing to do with your dog at the session, what I'm not willing to do. Setting the expectations is going to help to mitigate or prevent, these problems. But contractually, definitely having in there about what the monies are connected to. Like, for example, I recommend never considering a client until you have that initial non-refundable payment plus their contract signed. And so what is that connected to? Is that connected to consultation time, reserving the day, prep, acquisition of props or treats or whatever it is that's specific for that session. And then any other payments, keeping in mind, if there's like a cancellation later, you can't keep 100% of what has been. You can't keep 100% if you haven't rendered 100%. But that being said, we want to try to put language in there about no refunds. It is customized services. Everything that you can do, and actually this is a really good point. I never really thought about this until you just said that about chargebacks. Having contracts in place help to defend against chargebacks. So even just having one. And then having the right language, like I just mentioned, on the initial non-refundable payment, and that all payments are non-refundable, especially the closer you get to the session date. I think the one good thing, and correct me if I'm wrong with this, is I feel with portraiture versus like weddings or events, you relatively could allow for reschedules. Now, you don't want to be on your way to the session and a client being like, hey, I want to reschedule.
I have a hangnail today. I just don't feel like it.
Yeah. But so, it's not like a wedding where you've necessarily booked off that day for a year and then you can't fill it the closer you get to the date. But so I say all that to say, I'm kind of circling in my head about, I feel pretty confident in having in your contract about reschedules or cancellations. I wouldn't typically offer that to something like that's a wedding that you have to book off or an event type of deal. But this way you're setting the expectation of, if you try to reschedule under, let's say, 4 days before the session, that money needs to go to you, because are you really going to be able to fill that spot with another client? Probably not. And that's the kind of language that in a situation like that, the credit card companies are going to look to on the chargeback. Like, is this legit? Because you can't keep monies that you aren't rightfully owed. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Okay. Does it matter if you call it a session fee or a retainer or a deposit?
I'm going to start charging people when they ask me this question, and I'll be able to buy my own horse in cash. No, and that was, as soon as I said that a second ago about the non-refundable initial payment, I saw the look on your face, and I said, "Yep, that question's coming." I am of the mindset, the more that I litigate contracts and the more that this question comes up all the time, we want to be as concise and remove ambiguities as much as possible, not just legally, but also so clients don't feel like it's a moving target. So in this case, choosing between the word deposit or retainer, especially because I speak, internationally, nationally, and it could vary by jurisdiction, I say get rid of either of them. Call it a session fee. I just use the term non-refundable initial payment and, define that and connect it to the very specific services and I just outlined it a couple minutes ago. So, yeah, this is a top question that I get. And people go back and forth in groups. And I'm like, dude, just take it off the table. Like, let's just remove the ambiguities. And I joked on a live I did a couple weeks ago at the Lawtog. And I said, you call it a circus fee for all I care, right? Like, as long as you define it properly in your contract, that's what matters.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And I think it's helpful, I think, too, as portrait photographers, most of the money that clients pay is after we're wrapped up and done. So at that point, they've seen their images, they've placed an order. I think there are sometimes those few outliers periodically that they, have a really big order. And then all of a sudden they're like, man, I got some buyer's regret. Oh my God, did I really just spend $5,000 on pictures of my dog?
I would.
Totally worth it, of course. But like for stuff like that, I end up, for just me personally, I cringe if somebody's like, oh, they placed their order and I placed the whole big order today. I'm like, just wait a day or two.
Well, I do have final sale language that they can sign off on with their order. And when you do that in the ordering session, and it helps to reduce ambiguities, and questions. And it also kind of really psychologically, it's a micro commitment. Actually, it's an actual commitment. Not even just a micro commitment, but it's really making the client understand that they're committed to that. And that will also help you too, in the situation where there's a chargeback or buyer's remorse. Now, I say all that to say, and we've been talking about contracts, this doesn't mean you can't be client focused in how you run your business. It just is having the contracts, setting the expectations, using it to increase their confidence. Once you know what you're legally obligated to do or what the client's legally obligated to do, then you can offer customer service. So even if we look in this situation you just mentioned, I spent $5,000 on a coffee table book of my dog, which I would, and then my husband's like, what? And I call you to cancel it. Even if I had signed a final sale thing with you as the photographer can choose to say no or yes. And even within that, you can say, well, I already ordered because, like you mentioned, you might go quickly to go order. And all of a sudden they're like, oh no, I want to adjust. I just think having documents helps to put the clients have a little bit more skin in the game on it. But again, you still can always offer customer service. You just need to know your legal foundation and then you can go above and beyond.
Yeah, that's a great point. Absolutely. Oh my gosh. So many good things. Oh, I have one more question that people had about contracts. And that is, if you're at a session and, sometimes there's owners that maybe it's really few and far between because the people that are investing in pet photography treat their dog as family. But on occasion, there are people that maybe are not treating their dog in a manner that is in a way that we approve of. And at what point do we have the power, legal authority to be like, oh, we're done here? No. Like if they are, hitting their dog or doing something that's just not reasonable.
So do you want my legal answer or what I would do?
Well, both. I guess both. I mean, I'm guessing if we legally, would we have the power just to be like, hey, we're done. Here's your session feedback. Like, boom.
Yeah, it's going to all be circumstance specific, right? Yeah. We use the vibrate collars. We don't use shock. Right. But sometimes I've had people in public, they're like, oh my God, use shock collar. I'm like, no. And actually, now we don't even have to use it at all. Just putting it on him. He just doesn't like the vibrate. I'm telling you, he's the biggest baby. But anyways, in a situation like that, is it just a conflict of opinion when it comes to training tools, or is it like a true full-on abusive situation? Those are kind of two ends of the spectrum of examples, but it's going to be situation specific, honestly. So there's not like a clear-cut answer on that, but I think that's one of those things that, well, like we mentioned before, like in the intake process, if you are somebody that is a definite anti-vibrate collars, whatever they're called, then that's something you need to say up front, because once you're in the session, that's kind of hard to come back from. So if there's things that are like and I'm not saying you have to say dog abusers need not apply. I think that's kind of like that's a given. But if there's some very specific things that you don't necessarily condone, that even though they might be popular as training tools, et cetera, set that expectation up in the onboarding. But then when you're in the situation, if it's, this is the thing, we cannot prevent and contract away everything. So long as you have a paper trail and you have good common sense. And what I would do, if let's say they're hitting their dog, after I've knocked them out, then I would go to my car and, well, actually, I mean, we joke and jest, but like when my dog was stabbed, I was in such shock.
Oh my God. I can't even freaking fathom.
It was horrendous. I couldn't do anything. Like people are always like, oh, I'd kill him. I'm like, you're in so much shock. Anyways.
Right.
But what to my point is, I would, if you're going to end the session, cover yourself with a paper trail. Follow up an email to the client of saying, session was ended early due to these circumstances, and what the next steps are going to be if there are any. Maybe you're just going to refund whatever's going to happen, because you don't, again, charge back. They could go home and try to call up Visa and say, well, we didn't get our services. You need to be able to have proof, and having that writing will help you.
Right.
With that. So that's not a clear cut, what should we do type of situation. Just be reasonable and good judgment.
Yeah. And hopefully that's not a situation too many people encounter, because it's just not right. No one in this audience is doing that, because we're all animal lovers here.
Lovers. I know.
Oh, man. Oh my gosh, this has been so good. I'm looking at my notes here. I think we've covered everything that was on my list. Is there anything else, Rachel, that you can think of that is like a major potential pitfall, or something that pet photographers just really need to keep in mind, either related to or outside of those three kind of pillars?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, we didn't really touch on copyright, and it's not so specific just to pet photographers, but we're seeing an uptick in infringement in general. And so I just would be mindful of the photography. I mean, you guys have phenomenal photography in your community. Be mindful of photos that you repeatedly use in marketing. Those are ones I'd probably consider registering. Yeah. Ones that get the most engagement, the most attention. That doesn't necessarily mean those are automatically going to be infringed. You could have one that has like no engagement on Instagram, that some large company, I almost said Chewy, but I'm like, I like Chewy.com, so I don't want to throw them under the bus.
Chewy's fantastic.
Some large company could just come along, and it has happened. Actually, it was a horse feed company, believe it or not, a client that I represented, the photographer. They just took this horse photo off her Instagram and put it on the side of the horse feed bag.
Oh my God. Yeah. That's crazy. I had a friend of mine that they did something similar, and it was a very large company, and just like somebody sent them a congratulations. Hey, congratulations on your ad campaign for so-and-so. And they're like, what?
That right there. I'm glad you said that, because it'll always be found out.
Right.
I was at a real estate conference back in November, and one of the questions to the audience, she was telling me very similar copyright infringement. She goes, they mailed me the advertisement. And I open up my mailbox, and there's my photo on this, this infringing marketing material. But I in the U.S., our copyright protections are not where they could be. So your top photos, the ones you love the most. I mean, the lawyer answer is register all of them for when an infringement happens. The reality is you may not necessarily want to register them all, but please, definitely your top photos, ones that people are really highly seeking after, especially if you're licensing it out, not just, sales to your clients, but licensing it through sites online. Have the copyright registration in your pocket and monitor that stuff. And the reason I recommend registration is you're looking at statutory damages versus actual. So, there could be $0 in actual damages. That local mom and pop feed store could have made no money, no business using your photo. So actual could be $0, whereas statutory, it's outlined in the law. But most importantly is if you need to pursue the attorney's fees. The attorneys are the only ones that win. Unfortunately, and I have this conversation all the time with my clients at the firm, and we are able to recover on unregistered photos. So, meaning you just taken the photo, you've published, you haven't gone to the copyright office to register it online. But it's so much more helpful when we have a registration. So I just throw that little tidbit out there. We could probably do a whole episode on that, but I always try to look at that's just a big pitfall right now for many photographers, and pets, no exception.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, when you do that copyright registration, it's easy to do in bulk. So you could take, maybe do it monthly or quarterly or periodically, just like boom, and register a whole bunch of stuff at once.
Yeah, you can do up to 750 in a collection. And it's like I said, the lawyer answers do them all. The real answers, I don't even register all mine. It's the most important ones. If there's if and when, and it'll happen. And then if a large company takes your photo, call me because I love to eat them for breakfast.
Perfect. The only unfortunate part of that is like outside the US, for instance, some random Chinese company stealing your image and selling shirts. There's not really anything you can do about that though, right?
No, those ones are difficult. If you're looking at like in UK, Australia, Canada, we have a bit more reach because we have different conventions that we can reach through. But anything else over there, it's very difficult, which is really unfortunate, especially if you're someone that is going and having multiple revenue streams out of one session, right? Selling to the client, then stock photography, and then licensing maybe to company. And it's difficult because it can dilute the value of your photograph, unfortunately.
Right.
You can try to do takedown notices with those companies. As far as physical products, that's difficult. But
yeah. Crazy world out there. This digital world. This was so good though. So good, Rachel. Thank you so much. You guys out there, I'm sure we're going to let you plug your spots in a second here, but contracts, Lawtog has everything you guys need to get set up for your business. I can give them my Hair of the Dog code here, right, Rachel?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, perfect.
Before you do that, we just released a free legal roadmap. So a lot of what we talked about here, that way you can visually kind of see what you need. It has more definitions, a bit more explanation, but then give them your code.
Oh, perfect. What's the spot for that for them to get that legal roadmap?
At the Lawtog, just free legal roadmap in the menu. Yep.
Lawtog.com?
Yep.
Perfect. And then, the code, if you guys need any contracts from there, it's Hair of Dog 10 and you'll save 10%. Yes. And also if you're out there and you're like, man, actually, we didn't touch on this. And this is a huge thing in the pet photography world is, Nicole Begley photography versus like fluffy feet photography. And if you're going to have some sort of name of your business that's not your name and the trademarking of said name and how important that is.
I think it's pretty important. I mean, like you just joked about this digital world we're in, and it makes the world even smaller. So I think even now even more so now than any time in history before with social media and everything, it's so important to federally register your trademark in the US. And that way you're not having to compete against 49 other of the exact same name, because like when you go to set up your LLC, if I just set up the Lawtog LLC in Virginia, someone could go be the Lawtog in Florida. Well, then y'all would be confused of where to get the stuff from, right? And so that's why it's important to have the federal trademark to help protect that brand name. Plus, if you're ever looking at, what is your exit plan from your business? Are you planning on selling it? IP is the most important, intellectual property, right? And that includes the name of your business. So that's on the roadmap. I'm trying to think of where that's towards the end. So we actually kind of started this podcast with the first few steps. Trademark comes back around once you've got like the three things, the contracts, insurance, and entity and all that set up. I would probably... trademark's so incredibly important. Like it's one of those things that here's another example I just thought about. Trademarking, not even just so that you have SEO issues or you're not able to get your social media handles. What if there's someone in another state, same or similar name, who does hit dogs in their photography session? Do you want that reputation erroneously attached to you? And you guys, people might have been, oh, that's a weird example. There have been examples in the wedding world, actually, where I've seen this happen, that the wrong reputation and then the whole, it's the whole pitchfork and the canceling online and it was the wrong business. And it really could have been prevented if they had just protected their name, because the innocent photographer was like, I don't even live in Oklahoma. Like, what is the deal? What is going on here? So you just don't want the reputation of another business erroneously attached to you, and trademark can help with that.
Yeah, for sure. So if you guys are out there and you're like, man, I need to trademark my business name, Rachel can help you with that too at her Eden Law firm, actually helping me build out all sorts of new contracts for the hair of the dog stuff. So super helpful. I speak from experience. Rachel's team's awesome.
You'll be my friend by the end of our client attorney session, though, so be warned.
Yes, and then you get to see all the pictures of Bellamy. You need to show more of your little Belgian Malinois, because he's adorable too.
He's little, girl. He's like 130 pounds.
Bellamy gets all the spotlight. It's okay. He's my favorite. I love it. All right, Rachel, this has been so great. Go ahead and let us know one more time where people can find you online. And we really, really appreciate you taking the time to help us all get legally protected.
Yeah. So TheLawTog.com's got the free legal roadmap. We have the Facebook group on Facebook, obviously. And then my Instagram, you'll see reels. I don't really dance, maybe sometimes, but little quick tidbits of information, because I know this is a lot. So if you made it through this whole episode, I'm proud of you. Keep at it. It can be overwhelming, but feel free, honestly, to reach out. Myself or my team will help find you the resources that you need, because I feel like if we each individually get protected, we really lift the whole industry.
Yeah, agreed. Thanks so much, Rachel, for being here. And everybody else, I'll see you next week. If you enjoyed this podcast episode, go ahead and take a screenshot of this episode on your phone and post it up there on your Instagram stories, and be sure to tag us at Hair of the Dog Academy. And we would just love to see how you're listening. And full disclosure, sometimes we just like to give away a little pet photographer swag in the form of Hair of the Dog t-shirts and sweatshirts. So what are you waiting for? Go ahead and share that screenshot of this episode, and don't forget to tag us at Hair of the Dog Academy. And while you're there, maybe you want to jump on over to our account and see what we're up to on the gram. Would love to connect with you. Thanks for listening to the Hair of the Dog podcast. This was episode number 139. If you want to check out the show notes for access to any of the resources that we mentioned, simply go to www.hairofthedogacademy.com/139.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Hair of the Dog podcast. If you enjoyed this show, please take a minute to leave a review. And while you're there, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss our upcoming episodes. One last thing, if you are ready to dive into more resources, head over to our website at www. hairofthedogacademy.com. Thanks for being a part of this pet photography community.